What's up, guys? Wilwood big brake install for the Ram 1500. I was going to do put a mark on the ground. Shout out to Mo's, Boosted Motorsports. And a giant shout out to LittleShopMFG, Little Shop Manufacturing, for the excellent 5-star customer service so far for these brakes. That box. I did an unboxing. You'll see that. I'll put the link below for the unboxing. Along with the excellent prices from LSMFG. The communication is incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'm going to start this install, and if I have any issues, I'll text the guy. There's actually a number you can text and get answers. Communication makes the world go around. So a big shout out to LittleShopMFG. I was going to put a mark on the ground and nail the brakes, then get out and put a mark for before, the stock brakes, stopping distance. It's not accurate enough. There's too many discrepancies as far as accuracy goes, and I don't want to beat on my truck gathering inaccurate data. So I'm not going to do that. I am going to tell you how much of a difference it is visually and verbally, and I'm also going to weigh the differences between the stock caliper, the whole setup versus the new setup. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, less talking, more wrenching, get right to the point. It is 100 degrees out. It feels like 100. The humidity is real high, so I got a fan going. There's no air conditioning down here, and I'm constantly sweating, so bear with me. Alright, I got the truck on jack stands, e-brake is on, and just a heads up, these are bigger calipers, so I got 22-inch rims, 22-inch wheels. The inside radius from the center of the hub to the inside of the wheel is about 10 1/4. However, these wheels do taper outward towards the back. So I have actually about 10 1/2 mid wheel to the center hub. Now, I'm not exactly sure if these are going to fit yet. They should. The instructions say that it will fit most 22s and larger. After this setup, your wheel will be out just a CH over an 1/8 inch. I think the instructions said 0.135 of an inch outward, which is about that much. Not a lot at all. I have a stock setup. I do have a 2-inch drop, but nothing will be in the way because everything's stock. I have everything laid out. Got my rotors, my rotor hats, the calipers, screws, bracket, stainless steel braided lines. Got the brake pads ready. And let's start the dismantle of the stock brakes and get right to it. I'm gonna start by disconnecting the ABS wire from this little bracket right here from the brake line. Disconnect that and loosening the nut on the hard line behind this bracket, which is 12 mil. Just trying to get a little closer for you. So the nut you're doing on the hard line, that's 12 mil, is right behind the bracket. Right there. And I am using a line wrench, so grabs that nut nice without stripping it, because you don't want that to strip. It's gonna start dripping. I got some cardboard in a container for it. Alright, it's disconnected. It is dripping away, so what I just grabbed one of the clear caps that came with the new couplings, and I stuck it on there just to keep the fluid from, dripping too much. I have the cap on the reservoir up top, so it's not gonna siphon away. So there's some suction. Now I can go get a sandwich if I want to. This is great. Not dripping. I'm now going to take the nut off here on the bracket for the soft line. The brake hose, that's 13 mil. And that is now removed. Next step for me in dismantling, I'm going to take off the caliper bolts, the mounting bolts that are on the spindle. I'm going to use my 21 mil socket and pop off the top bolt. Loosen the bottom bolt. Now they get them loose, I'm going to jump to the side impact. Caliper is loose. I'll slowly remove it. Here you go. Caliper's off. Pretty simple, just 2 bolts. Still got plenty of meat of pad left too. Yeah, good amount of meat on there still. But I'm gonna keep these. Now I gotta take off the rotor. Stock, you might have retaining clips on it, 2 or 3 of your studs. Those can come off with a flathead and a hammer, just kind of get behind them and pry them off. I don't have them now because a couple years ago we put on new rotors, so I was having a little vibration issue, which did solve it. These egg pretty easily, the stock ones. Since I don't have the retaining clips on there, they should slide right off. The radial arm, the bracket for the caliper, we have to do a little trimming on the dust plate, the backing cover for this to fit. So you're just gonna make a little triangle mark right here. And I'm gonna use a pair of snips. And this is really close, so I'm just gonna trim this a little bit as well. And grab my snips and just snip that off. Bend it back. Now the radial arm will fit good without rubbing against the cover. I am going to squirt that because it's raw metal and I don't want it to rust. Squirt it with some black paint. Let's protect it a little bit. All right, now I can install the radial arm, the bracket for the caliper, onto the spindle. And I put the bolts through, supplied bolts with the washers and a 0.035 spacer they give you between the bracket and the spindle. I'm going to temporarily screw these on. All right, it's on. That's nice. I'm just making them a little more snug, just that way it doesn't move on me. And this socket is 13/16. So as you can see, huge difference in size. So the Wilwoods are exactly just a hair under 16 inches. The OEMs, a hair over 13 inches. 13, so there's a 3-inch plus or minus difference between the Wilwood rotors and the stock rotors. Now I want to show you guys the size difference of the thickness because this is kind of important. The vented rotors are very beneficial when you have high heat and heavy duty brakes, which are typical in a truck, but look at the size difference here. You got about 5/16 gap there, and you have a whopping, I'm gonna say about a 1/2 inch to 5/8. The overall thickness of the stock rotor is 1 1/8 inches. Gap's about 1/4 strong. Overall thickness of the Wilwood rotor is about 1 3/8 inches, and the vent gap is 5/8 of an inch. Huge difference. I mean, everything's bigger. It's a big brake kit, so the calipers are bigger, everything's bigger. All right, next up is the hat assembly to the rotor. Gotta use the Loctite they gave you, Loctite 271. And we gotta torque spec those and torque sequence those bolts to the rotor. All right, I'm gonna grab an aluminum hat, turn it this way, put it down first, and grab the rotor. Smooth side goes towards the hat. I'm gonna line up the holes with the holes on the hat like that. You're gonna grab the bag of bolts it comes with. Gonna add some Loctite. Whoa, too much Loctite. I'm gonna share that with another bolt. That was too much. And then screw them in by hand. Got all the bolts on. I'm now gonna torque all those bolts to 25 foot-pounds of torque. 25. I'm using a 5/16 12-point socket. I'm gonna get them in by hand first before I torque them. Now we're gonna torque these bolts like you would put on a wheel. You're gonna jump here like a star pattern and just keep going back and forth like you would put on a wheel. If you ever put in an 8-lug wheel before, you know how to go in the star pattern. There's 12 bolts total. I'm gonna start torquing them down. All right, they are all torqued. Now I can install this. I'm gonna grab 2 lug nuts to help keep the rotor from moving after I get this on. What I am gonna do is just get this little wire brushing because it's kind of rusty, the hub. So let me clean it up a little bit. I just found out Trump just had a assassination attempt on him. Hope he's all right. We don't want an assassination attempt on anybody. But that's gonna affect the economy a little bit. I wonder what's gonna stock and everything. Not good, man. I had a couple bumps on my hub here of rust. And I got my grinder out and just kind of shaved them off a little bit. Now it's nice and smooth. Because any wobble in any area where, you know, this rotor is not gonna sit flat, you're gonna get vibrations. So it's nice and smooth now. Let me get this rotor on. Alright, I'm gonna grab 2 lug nuts and put them on here to keep this hat flat on the hub. Alright, so the hat, when I had that rotor on, I'll grab the other hat because the rotor's really heavy. There's a tapered edge right here on the hub. See it? There is a beveled edge here. And I contacted them at Little Shop and he got back to me quick as usual. He said to clean off the rust on this area here where the hat sits, because there is a lot of rust. I have this tool, but I can't get underneath the stud because that's where the tab is that touches the hub. I have this little wheel with sandpaper on it, and that I don't want to mess up the stud. So what I'm going to do, I have a Dremel with a drum disc, sand disc on it, a little drum disc. I'm going to sand where those tabs sit. Not grinding, I'm just removing the rust, surface rust, a little bit under each stud where the hat sits, and hopefully it sits a lot better because it wasn't sitting flat. That's why when I put the extra lug nut on, I started to move. And I'm like, what's going on? So I put them all on. Then I went to spin it, and it was wobbly, so it wasn't sitting right. And there's a lot of rust here. So I'm almost thinking about getting new hubs. All right, so that's clean. Let's see if the hat sits the way it's supposed to. There you go. It's sitting where it's supposed to. He sent me an AutoCAD picture, and that face of this is on the line of the taper, so that's good. A million times better. And thank you, Little Shop, for getting back to me. Your hours were not on Saturday, but you got back to me, and I appreciate that, man. Thank you. All right, let me pop this off, and we'll put the assembled rotor back on. There it is. There it is. We're good. A little skimmy for a little bit. You gotta remember, this truck's 7 years old. I mean, it has low miles, but these things like to rust. The stock rotor is tapered so much, like that. Look at the taper. Look at the bevel on that. It's a huge bevel, so that allows moisture to get in there and causes it to build up and almost conform to that type of rotor. Well, this rotor is, you know, sitting more flat in that area. You got to clean the rust off. Here we go. Now it's not wobbling. Thank God. Good. Now we can move on to the caliper. All right, now I'm going to mount the caliper, and just to give you guys a heads up, the boxes are labeled right hand and left hand. Everything on the calipers is basically the same, but there's a piston that's larger than the other two, and that goes to the front. You want to make sure they're on the right side. Some rotors are directional. These ones are not. It all depends which ones you get, but it will be labeled on the box. So I'm going to apply some lightweight oil to the mounting studs. Careful not to get any on the rotor, and your bedding time will be multiplied times 2. Then install 1.035 supplied shim to each one of the studs. And I'm going to put the caliper on. I'll make sure it's seated on that radial bracket, and put the washers on with the nuts. Alright, so real quick, I have this on. Before I go any further, I want to show you guys the distance there and there. See how I'm tight on the left side and the right side's open? It's going to need more shims. So I'm going to take the caliper off and add more shims to the radial bracket right here, in between the spindle and the bracket, to move this whole caliper this way. I'm probably going to add 3 more on each one to get that centered, and then I'll put the brake pads in. Alright, so I had to dismantle this, put it back on, check it again, shim, shim, shim. So I have a total on this side 4 shims between the spindle and the bracket to push it out, so this is centered with the rotor. And as you can see, the space is the same on both sides. That's important because you want the discs to just float, skim the pad. If it's not centered, it'll rub one side more than the other. And make sure your rotor's, spinning freely. Now to install the brake pads. All right, with the caliper on, these bridge pins that hold the brake pads, we gotta go in here with some needle nose pliers and pull out that retaining pin right there for the bridge pin. 1. 2. And these bridge pins will slide out. Just the pads, they're all the same, at least with this kit, and they do give you extra retaining clips for the bridge pins, which is cool for later on. What's cool about this too, once those bridge pins are slid out, these just slide right in. Almost too easy. It's a nice setup. They slip right in. I'm going to temporarily push the bridge pins in. I'm going to check our clearance again. So there's 2 areas of clearance we're going to check. The distance between the rotor and the pad on both sides is equal. I did it before we did the pads, so that's good. Also, the height of the pad needs to be flush with the rotor. I am up about a 32nd of an inch, and I do have 2 shims down there from the caliper to the radial arm, so I'm going to take the caliper off and remove the shim and put it back on, and this should make it flush on top. Now that I know everything moves freely and everything is mounted properly, all the spacing is correct. Also, heads up, the spacers that you use under the caliper and between the bracket and the spindle, use the same amount on each side. So if it's 2, use 2, 3, use 3, etc. I'm now going to back out the mounting bracket bolts, add Loctite, and torque these 2 to 60 foot-pounds. And the caliper mounting nuts, I'm going to back these off. A little bit of Loctite. I don't think you need it because these are locking nuts, but these are getting set at 30 foot-pounds of torque. This procedure could have been done once you figured out the spacing and the shimming. And there's a lot taking off, put it on. This is safety first. You want to make sure it's done properly. And this is my first time doing these brakes, so once the left side done, the right side will go really quick. $60 foot-pounds. Put the rotor back on. If we're careful, should like butter. Make sure the washers are on. And these are going to be set to 30 foot-pounds. Your kit might be different. This is the kit I'm using. I'm following the instructions for the torque settings. Double check. It's moving freely. Pads are flush at the top, equal space on both sides. Now I'm going to mount the wheel just to make sure that we got full clearance. Then I'll install the brake line. And before I forget, we're going to install these retaining clips for the bridge bolts. You can use a flathead screwdriver too, but this is way easier. Get the click. Push it in until it clicks in. Make sure they're seated. Check them. Good. I got the wheel temporarily on. I'm just spinning to make sure clearance is good. We got plenty of clearance there. I'd say about 1 3/8 inches from the wheel with 22, so it is possible you can run 20s. I will also measure from the center hub to the outside of this kit, just to give you guys an idea of how much clearance you would need. All right, I take the wheel off and do the brake line. All right, wheel is off. I had exactly 1 3/8 inches clearance from one point, but the closest point right there, I was at 1 1/4 inches, plus or minus. All depending on what wheel you have. Definitely check fitment distancing before you go to get your wheels. And the distance between the center hub and the furthest point of the caliper is about 9 1/4 inches. I called this a coupling earlier because it looked like a coupling. It had plastic things on it. It used to stop the fluid from dripping. But I actually hooked up my stock caliper back up because it was dripping again. And I'll just pop that off when I'm ready to do the line. But this is the nipple we're adding on to the caliper. You can add a sealant. Loctite makes a thread sealant. I don't have any, so I'm keeping it old school and using some PTFE tape, Teflon tape. And I'm going to mount that to the caliper. And you want to put it in a direction that flows with the threads, not against it. You also want to be careful not to block that hole up. Love dropping my Teflon tape and watching it roll away 20 feet. It's awesome. All right, let's keep this professional. All right, peel off the dust cover on the inside of the caliper. Install the nipple, adapter, whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. An 11mm line wrench. I'm going to tighten this onto the caliper. Not too crazy tight. I mean, if you're a plumber, you know. But you don't want to go too tight. Adapter's on. Now putting the 90-degree elbow side onto the adapter. It's a compression fitting. And I'm going to point it to the front. Up a little bit. And it's 13mm. It's going to get snug for now because I might want to rotate that just in case anything's in the way. I'm now going to connect the stainless steel braided line to the hard line. Insert the line through the hole and connect it to the hard line. All right. Braided line is up to the hard line and you are in for a treat. The nut that goes on the new line, it's brand new, so it doesn't just spin on. You think you cross thread and you back it out, you got fluid flying everywhere. Put it on, take it off. I'm kind of, freaking out a little bit because I'm like, I don't want to cross thread. Does this even fit? And I started cranking, and I was lined up. It's just a little bit of friction. If you haven't done it before, it's going to be a lot of four-letter words. I don't think anybody in the history of auto mechanics has ever said that, oh, I did brake lines today. I had such a great job. It's so fun. Love doing brake lines. Nobody's ever said that. All right, just a heads up. This clip is supposed to go in the groove right there on the stainless steel braided brake line. My truck has a welded piece here for the threads for the stock bolt. I'm gonna have to grind that down a good 1/16 of an inch in order to get this clip to snap in there to hold it. You might not have this. I do. I gotta grind it down. What I did is I ground a little bit in the front and the back, so when you put the hose in now, we get plenty of clearance for that clip. And I'll paint all that before I put it on so it don't rust. And there's the clip on, holding the hard line to the soft line. at the frame, and a zip tie to hold the ABS wire to the new braided wire. All right, time to see the weight difference from the stock setup to the new Wilwood setup. I'm gonna weigh the stock rotor, caliper, pads, brake line. And stock is 42.6. Now to weigh the new Wilwood big brakes. Rotor, 28.2. Under the caliper, the pads, radial arm, and the stainless steel braided line. And it comes to 46.8. So stock's about 42.6 pounds. Wilwoods are 46.8 pounds. So you get about a 4 pound difference plus or minus. This isn't very accurate. And the only downfall about these brakes, I found two that I can think of. At the track, you're not gonna be able to run 17s anymore. I'm not doing much track racing anymore. It's more of a street truck now, so that's okay with me. Another issue is if I ever get a flat tire, my spare won't fit. Yeah, I can get a 22-inch tire and put it where the spare goes, but it'll also be 4 inches lower than it is now. But what I'll have to do if I get a flat, I'll have to jack the truck up and swap a rear tire to the front and then put the spare in the back, which is a lot of work, but how often do you get flat tires? So with those being said, I'm still happy I did this. An overall 4 pound difference, it's not bad at all for the size of these calipers and rotors. The hat's aluminum, so that helps with weight. The caliper's aluminum as well. So far, so good. And the majority of the weight difference is in the rotor. The stock rotor is 24.6, and the Wilwood rotor is 28 pounds. So there's like 95% of your weight difference. Yeah. All right, for bleeding, I tried this method. I saw it online, and it actually works really good. Get a hose that fits your nipple kind of tight. You want it to fit on there snugly. And when you loosen the bleeder valve like a quarter turn, you pump the brakes. And you keep an eye on this, and you watch all the air bubbles come out. And air won't go back in because it's in brake fluid. It's actually worked really good. I had the wife pump the brakes while I held this all together and watched the air come out. Genius idea. And make sure you do the passenger side first because that's the furthest away from the reservoir. And make sure that's full as you do it. And this is all the nasty stuff that came out, dark brown. I overbled just to make sure I got rid of all the dark fluid. This is 1/4 inch line I used. Clear probably would have been better, but you are paying attention to the bubbles in the bottom of the line. I drilled a 1/4 inch hole in the cap and made a little tiny 1/16 hole right there in case any pressure builds up, it'll exit the bottle. And here's the right side. It's all done. I did the driver's side first, so after doing that, this took about an hour and 20 minutes to do. It's really simple once you do one. All right, brakes are bled. The pedal feels really stiff now. I'm gonna put the wheels on, lower it back down, and then bed the brakes. Brake bedding. We're going to do a series of light decelerations. Going to hold the pedal 3 to 5 seconds and then double that time for the release. I'll probably go 25, 30 miles per hour and then do that again moderately, pressing a little harder, 3 to 5 seconds depressing and then letting go for about 8 to 10 seconds. And then the third series, we're going to go about 60 miles per hour and then really give it some brake juice. We're trying to marry the pads to the rotor so they have a happy marriage. We want them getting along. Then we're going to decelerate from 60 to 25 and do that about 8 times, 8 to 10 times. And the bedding procedure should be complete. All right, hopefully the camera doesn't fall off my window. That'll be my luck. On the hot decelerations, I nail the brakes and you guys go flying. We also have to remove the paint that's on the rotors or whatever coating that is they put in the rotors. Get down to bare metal. Let's do this. I want you to do it on track, which is virtually impossible. So I would keep my distance between people, try to find a side road that's nice and straight where you can get safely 60 miles per hour and decelerate without anybody smashing into you. So I'm doing my series of 3 to 5 seconds, letting it cool twice as long, 3 to 5 seconds, letting it cool twice as long. Now I'm starting to get people behind me. I gotta take a left up here anyways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was good. All right, now no one's behind me, which is great. You start feeling the friction forming. All right, here's my series of light depressions. I'm gonna start moving up to moderate depressions for 3 to 5 seconds and resting for 10. A lot of stop and go. All right, my second series is done. Moderate brake pressing. Now I'm going to the hard pressing. I did those series about 5, 6, 7 times. Now I'm gonna do this series, the last series, 8 to 10 times. Going from 60 down to 25, 60 to 25. At least 8 times. I'm gonna hit it hard. Tire stripped a little bit in the front. I made a mistake. I went to 0. Shouldn't have done that. I'm supposed to go to 25 and let go. I only did it once. Let's try it again. What we're doing is really heating the pads up, heating the rotor up, get them to bond good, releasing gases. And there'll be a cool down procedure as well. And once it cools down, then the brake should work really nice. All right, now you can smell like clutch. That's a good thing. Open your window. If you start smelling clutch, that's a good sign that the procedure is complete. I'm done beating on my truck. I'm gonna do the cool down procedure, which is just letting it sit and cool down. Yeah, you can smell it. We're good. Took me about 6 times to up to 60 miles per hour, jam it down to 25. Now the whole truck smells like clutch. Bringing it back home, gonna let it cool down. So I did feel a little bit of brake fade. That's also a sign that you are done with the bedding procedure. What's awesome is the rotors are completely clean to the size of the brake pads. This is how they're supposed to look. If you have any streaking at all, you gotta continue. And it's just really important to follow that bedding procedure, because if you don't do it right, you might have to resurface your rotors, and you don't want to do that. But the instructions are on their website. Whatever brake kit you choose, go down to the PDF, the instructions, it'll tell you exactly how to do the brake bedding. And you can smell the pads. Also want to check for any leaks in the brake lines you might have. It's always good to double check. On the caliper and at the hard line. All right, guys, there's your big brake install by Wilwood, and I got the kit from LittleShopMFG. I'll leave their links below. I'm gonna let the brakes cool down to ambient temperature till they're totally cooled down, and then I'll take it for a rip again. I'll do a full review in about 2 weeks. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave a question below. I'll try to answer them. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.